there, you're listening to the Oklahoma On Stage podcast. Here we sit down with the folks that make the magic happen on and off stage in the Oklahoma theater scene. We're glad you joined us. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And our website is oklahomaonstage.org. If you have any comments or questions, you can send them to us at oklahomaonstage@gmail.com. If you like the podcast, please leave us a rating and review and share with those you know. Let's not waste any more time, shall we? Grab a snack and a drink and take your seat. The show is about to begin.
Welcome back to Oklahoma On Stage. As always, I'm Tim. I'm your host. Today's guest is the kind of theater maker who doesn't just build worlds, he suspends them in midair. From Chicago's Looking Glass Theater to Lyric Theater of Oklahoma, from circus rigs to community murals, he has spent his entire career blending imagination with physics. He's now the head of theater at Oklahoma State University, where he champions underrepresented, I used to be able to talk, voices and pushes the boundaries of what theater technology can be. This is a conversation about creativity, craft, and the courage to build what doesn't exist yet. Oklahoma On Stage family, please join me in welcoming Lee Brasuell to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Love
the intro.
I'm glad you could be here. So, as always, Lee, we just kind of hit the elephant in the room and tell me, how did you first get started in theater?
By accident. My senior year of high school, I was trying to find classes to take, and there was one called Technical Theater, and I was like, hey, that looks interesting. The instructor that was there, they did one show a year. It was kind of the same thing. I went and watched them in high school. Don't really remember any of the shows. And I got to class the first day, and it was a new instructor. And she was like, hey, is there anybody here that's got any experience in wood shop or, welding? And, raised my hand because my senior year of high school, the only class I had to take was English, and the rest were free. And so it was filled with tech theater, wood shop, my architectural and drafting classes, and art. And so I raised my hand and kind of got, hey, well, I'm going to have you build stuff. And the first show that year was Dracula, and I fell in love. I got to do all the things I enjoyed doing in life, drawing, painting, drafting, all those things. That's what I was doing my senior year. And I found theater. And I didn't know at the time that that's, what I was going to do the rest of my life. I was just like, hey, I get to do all this stuff. I started building shows. Of course, Dracula being the first show, we got to do tons of special effects. I went overboard with the fog, of course. And, hindsight now, knowing a lot of the rules and regulations, probably broke a few then, but it was so much fun. Making the bats fly and fog and just all those things. I fell in love with it. But didn't think anything else about it. I was just there doing it, And a professor from University of Central Oklahoma, who came to be one of my closest friends over time, Doug Getzoff, had come to see the show. He's like, hey, what are you doing? What are you doing after you leave here? And I was like, I don't know. I'm thinking about going to the military. I don't know. I'm not exactly sure yet. I didn't have plans. He was like, have you ever thought about doing this? I was like, no. Didn't think about it again. But that whole year, every show, that's what I did. I spent my whole senior year in the theater, building, creating, and I just loved it. I was doing all those other classes. I was so ahead in those other classes, I got to go down to the theater and work on the sets all the time.
Nice.
And I was like, oh, maybe this is something I could do. And so I reached back out later my senior year, and he was like, yeah, we can find you some money. And so I went to UCO. I really still didn't know much about theater, except for what I had done my senior year of high school. And at that time, UCO was a completely different school than what it is now. This was 93. They had just converted the dirt parking lots into, paved parking lots at the time. Mitchell Hall Theater was just the theater. There wasn't any of the shops or anything built on at that time. And I got there and just dove straight in. I was a shop rat. Still didn't really know much about theater, but I just knew I loved to build, create things. And Doug, kind of took me under his wing at the time. And I spent, that first year, they needed stage managers. And so for my scholarships, I was stage managing. I stage managed opera. And then I stage managed Hamlet. I was the assistant stage manager. I wasn't I was assistant stage manager. And, that's where I kind of really just got the bug. I got the bug so much that I didn't really pay attention to my other classes.
Understood.
My first year. Because I would stay there night, day, building, painting, stage managing. Need somebody to run follow spot, I'll do it. Because it was so much fun. And I neglected some other things, at that time. And so really what happened is after my first year, I actually took a semester off. And Doug, he was like, what are you doing? What are you doing to, you've got all this great potential, why are you, I was working at Jiffy Lube. He was like, why are you working at Jiffy Lube? And I still did some shows. He was doing things all around town at the time. He was the scene design technical director at UCO. And so I was still helping him do that. And he finally got me back and I got things right. I started going to class and paying attention to the other things, plus doing all the fun stuff in theater. So I got really heavily involved, and by my second year after, doing some assistant stage managing, just working in the shop, Doug knew that I loved art and I had taken design classes and a few other things. And he had seen some of my drawings and he was like, hey, have you ever thought about designing? I was like, oh, I'd love to, and he got me into doing some assistant design work and other things. And by my junior year, not only was I the, head carpenter at the time in the shop, I was doing scene painting. He let me design a show. And so by the time I left undergrad, I had already designed 4 shows. My favorite one was King Stag, which went to KCACTF, won awards at KCACTF. And I was like, hey, maybe this is really, really what I can make a living at this at that time. And so, I kept going, kept building, kept creating, and, eventually went off to grad school. During that time, though, I also started working with a lot of the community theaters in Oklahoma in the mid-90s at that time. Oklahoma Shakespeare in the Park, OSP. When they're out Hafer Park, did a lot of work out there. It was kind of like some of my first shows outside of academia was out there.
You were at the one that burned it down, were you?
No, I was not. Which time?
That's
the
right.
question.
Yeah.
We would get up at, as soon as the sun came up to go out there and work because, it would get hot. It was a dark brown stage, no shade or anything. So worked out there in the summers and then got hired at Lyric Theater when I was an undergrad as well. This is when they were still at OCU, right after they were still performing at OCU, but not affiliated with OCU anymore. So I was the master carpenter for them. for a couple of summers. Worked at Carpenter Square during that time. Got to design a couple shows at Stage Center. I miss that place. I love that theater. For people that don't know about Stage Center, that was downtown. It was this very futuristic, theater that looked like, building or parts of a computer that were just taken and plopped into place. Not a right angle in the whole building. But got to do shows with Carpenter Square there. Design and parts of Being Earnest with Doobie Potter, rest in peace. I Hate Hamlet, got to design that this was all when I was an undergrad.
Wow.
So, I was just doing so much. And at that time, there wasn't a lot of, pretty much those theaters I just mentioned were the theaters in Oklahoma City at the time. And so, I was working for all those. And then I met my now wife at that time. We were working together in undergrad on a couple shows. Then we got married and we left for grad school, Detroit, Michigan. So that's kind of like it all in a brief nutshell.
Yeah.
Of my time in, getting into theater.
So you talked about getting started in high school. Where would you go to high school at?
Northwest Classen.
Okay.
Yeah. Northwest Classen Knights.
Okay. You're an Oklahoma City boy.
I was born and raised. My parents still live my dad. My mother passed away a few years ago. My dad still lives in the same house they purchased when I was a year old.
Wow.
So I was born and raised in Oklahoma City. Lived there until I was 25 before I moved away for grad school.
Okay, so you got your bachelor's at the University of Central Oklahoma, left for Wayne State, and you said it was in Michigan?
Yeah, downtown Detroit, Michigan.
Downtown Detroit. What drew you there?
So, my wife and I, like I said, I met my wife, Megan, in undergrad at UCO, and we were both looking for graduate programs. And there were only a few programs in the country that had programs for both of us. She was going into theater management, and of course I was going into scene design, technical direction. So it became between Florida State and Wayne State University. And when we were interviewing, we went to Erda's. Wayne State, we both interviewed with them separate, but when we came back, when we were talking, that was like, oh, that's where we want to go. She had a really great interview with their department, and I had a great interview with Lazar Kashansky. He was a Russian professor and very into the avant-garde movement, and they also offered a full scholarship and medical insurance. And so,
Enough said.
Yeah. So we were like, that's what we're going to do.
Wow.
So we got married in August of 2000. We went on our honeymoon, and I think it was the 15th of August. We were in Detroit, Michigan.
Okay.
Starting grad school. So it was a fast and furious week. But we always say to each other that move right after getting married was probably one of the best things for us, because we had to rely on each other, in a foreign town that was not Oklahoma City by any means. And so, yeah, we ended up there at the Hillberry in Michigan. Spent 3 years there.
So did you always have a plan to come back to Oklahoma?
No.
Okay.
No, when we got married and we were leaving, the plan was never, we were gone. We were not coming back to Oklahoma. Because when we left, we felt like we had already accomplished what we could in Oklahoma at that time. We worked both at Lyric, worked at the theaters at that time around. And so we were out looking for new things. We went off to grad school. After grad school, we did come back for like 2 months while we were searching for work. And then I was interviewing a bunch of places, and I got a position in at the Theater of Western Springs in Western Springs, Illinois, which is a far suburb of Chicago. And at that time, they had just celebrated their 75th anniversary. It was community theater, one of the largest in the country. And so they hired me on as their technical director and resident designer. And so, once again, it was the day after our anniversary on August 6th. I packed up what I could in the car and drove to Chicago and found a little house or apartment right there on the train line, halfway between downtown Chicago and Western Springs, and was there a month before she moved up there. Doug, who I mentioned, my undergraduate professor, became one of my best friends. Actually drove her up with the trailer to the behind and everything afterwards. So, and we love it. It was Chicago. I was working at the Theater of Western Springs. My wife got a job downtown for a company, and so we were both commuting opposite directions, and we loved it. She went on to get a job at the Chicago Theater, which everybody knows, the big marquee. Anytime you think about Chicago, she was the director of house operations. I was at the Theater of Western Springs, and after 3 years there, it was a great job. It was a great entry job. I was able to get out and network and work other places. I took a job as the assistant technical director at Looking Glass. I had seen a show there. It was the very first production they had done in their new space called Looking Glass Alice. And I was just mesmerized because it was theater like I had not seen yet here in Oklahoma, or, even at the Hillberry, which was, mainly classical work. And it was an ensemble piece. It was original. It was energetic. It told a story. Cirque was, kind of coming around, becoming big at that time. And it was like Cirque infused with that. And I was just like, oh, I love this. And one of my best friends from grad school was on the run crew at that time there. And so I talked with him afterwards, and a few months later they had a job opening come up as a assistant technical director. So I left my other job, took a pretty substantial pay cut, and went and worked for them just because I loved what they were doing. It's a black box. And if you know anything about Chicago and the old fires that burned down Chicago, the Chicago fire, one of the few buildings that was standing was the water tower in downtown. And that's where the theater was. It was built in the old water tower.
Okay.
And this historic building, true black box. There's no backstage. There's no anything. But every time you go in there, it looks completely different because of the worlds they create. And so I started working with them, and when I was working with them, that's how I got into, the circus and aerial rigging, because Looking Glass is an ensemble based piece, and they do a lot of new works. That's their specialty, is creating new works. And, they had done that first rendition of Looking Glass Alice and brought a Cirque person in. One of the shows, the second show I was there for, was a production called Argonautica by Mary Zimmerman. And there was this flying in there, and I was like, oh, that's really cool. And so I started diving more and more into that aspect because, I'm a shop person. I love everything there is technical about theater.
Sure.
And started, really, how does that happen? How does this happen? Wait, actually, I need to go back to my undergrad when I did Angels in America at UCO.
All right.
Because I flew the Angel there.
So that's where it all started?
That's where it all started.
Okay.
That's where it really all started. It was Angels in America at UCO. I was the stage manager but we did 1 and 2. I did both of those. the stage manager, and I did the special effects flying for it. All the special effects. I didn't really know much about flying at that time, and I couldn't really Google it, but in hindsight, it was safe, but I would do it completely different. But when I got to Looking Glass, that's when I, really like, this is something that's I really enjoy. And what I really enjoyed about it was not just the making the people fly, it was the design going into it. How do you do it?
Cool.
And so I was working with Bill, who was the TD at that time, on some stuff, and it didn't have a ton. It just had one lift in it. And then the people at Looking Glass sent me to a thing called NAFED, which is a week-long workshop on special effects and flying.
Okay.
And so that's where I really kind of started delving into that. And kind of since then, the rest has been history, I came back and started just doing more and more shows. We had Black Diamond, a couple others. I left as the ATD and took a job at Moraine Valley Community College because I had a son on the way. It was a little bit more stable of a job, better insurance. But I kept going back to them. They kept bringing me back to do those. And I think the reason they kept bringing me back, wasn't because I could, do the logistical part of the aerial and circus rigging, is because, and this is what I think theater goes back to all the time, I would tell the story. I would create the apparatus. I would create the designs for that. They remounted Looking Glass Alice soon after that, and I redesigned a bunch of the components of it. Instead for this one component, they wanted the king to walk sideways along the wall. So, okay, well, how do I do that? How do I tell that story? Figure that out. The Red Queen, if the show it's Looking Glass Alice, and it takes, it's not out just Alice in Wonderland. It's a whole different take. The chessboard is a big piece of this. And the Red Queen originally was performing this big costume that walked on stilts. But that performer wasn't there anymore, so they had put the person on a ladder on wheels, and the dress went over the whole thing. Well, that wasn't very safe.
Yeah.
It hit a thing on the floor, and it fell over. So I built this whole apparatus for that. I designed an apparatus and, how it would move across stage and all that. And so I was really thinking about it, not just from, hey, how can we make people fly? I'm thinking about is like, how do I tell the story and create the designs? And so since then, I've done like the little prints where I got to design all the aerial men, or the planetary men. And so really telling those stories. I just finished Circus Quixote with them, which is another original show. So I really just fell in love with that part of theater when I was in Chicago.
So you get your MFA.
Mm-hmm.
You've working in Chicago. You eventually made it working at a community theater, or a community college, rather. What brought you back to Oklahoma?
Family. My wife and I were both from Oklahoma. So, we had 2 boys at the time. And we were, we had some things that happened in Chicago. I said my wife had worked at the Chicago Theater, Madison Square Garden, purchased it. They pretty much everybody on the top floor, GM down by. So there were some things at that time that was like, well, if we're going to make a change, this is the time. And every time we got a free moment, we were coming back to Oklahoma. And we want our boys to be able to spend time with the family. But it wasn't easy. We weren't sure. We were thinking, the places were Kansas City, Dallas. And then the opportunity came up here at OSU. They were looking for a technical director. And my wife and I had a long talk. It's like, do we want to move back? And when we made the decision, for me, I've already mentioned how Doug was a huge influence in my life. I wanted to make, my decision was I want to make a difference here in Oklahoma. I want people to understand that there's a whole other world of theater out there, professionally, that you can do. And I wanted to bring what I had learned out doing all those shows in Chicago, not just at Looking Glass, but, I worked for Shanghai Baiji, and I designed a bunch of other shows. I wanted to bring that back to the students here and bring it back and teach them. Because I knew I always, teaching was what I always wanted to do. So
you always wanted to be a teacher?
I'll because of Doug.
Okay.
Because Doug had influenced me so much, it got me out of a place where I didn't really care. I knew that I wanted to teach. And so that's why I took the job at Moraine Valley Community College in Chicago, because I was able to teach and still do a lot of extra stuff. And then when we came back here, I was like, no, I want to be able to teach and show students, people here in Oklahoma, that there's other things out there, that there's a whole other world of theater. Because I didn't even know that until I got there.
Sure.
And I've been lucky enough that I've got to do a trip, with students to Chicago, and got to take them to see shows down in Oklahoma City, whether it's Lyric or some of the other shows coming through, so that they can just be exposed. And that was the main drive back, is to come back, was a family. But then it's like, if we're coming back, I want to be able to make a difference to the artist here in Oklahoma.
Very cool. I love that. I love that. So, transforming into your professional world here, we talked a lot about, some of the different places you've worked, Looking Glass Theater, some of the productions you've worked on. What you talked a little bit about it at UCO, doing it at UCO, but what's that story behind getting into the circus and the aerial rigging? You worked with a circus?
Well, the stuff that, doing Angels of America, I did with Looking Glass Theaters, where I really got into it, because, like I said, they do so much storytelling through movement and the circus arts. They team up a lot with the Actors Gymnasium in Chicago, which is a circus training facility. Sylvia Hernandez Asazi runs it. And for me, being more of a technical production design person, man, I loved it. There's just all those things into it. So that's how I got into doing the circus and aerial rigging. The that first production of Looking Glass House, I said they brought in Scott Osgood, who was one of the lead riggers for Circus LA. That's who I start learning from there too, and just started doing that. And then I did Shanghai Baiji, which was a company based out of Branson that does big international tours. I did that show, and I've done some other things. So that's really how I got involved with it. And for me, like I said, it's about creating the apparatus and the designs to tell a story.
Okay. So what is something that people don't understand about the safety, the math, and the creativity behind all of what they see when they see that?
There's so much. I think the easiest thing for me to say is people don't understand the time commitment that goes into it, how long we start planning in advance, some of this stuff. First, it comes at, that idea. What is it that we want to do? Going through the, process of sketching or, conceptualizing, breaking that down. But then you have to think, okay, what are the logistics of this? I always say time, personnel, and money, right? So that's your three, well, and good, cheap, fast. That's the other, my other pile. So people hear me say that, but, time, personnel, and money. What do we have to accomplish this story? And so it comes down to breaking down, okay, here's what it's going to take to accomplish that feat in terms of the engineering of it. Here's the equipment that we need. Here's the budget we have. Or from a safety factor, this is what it's going to take. There's a lot of math involved in that in terms of, structural load. Like if you're doing a high wire, can the structure that you're attaching it to hold that tension? What are the dynamics on that load? And so there's a lot of planning that goes in to figure all those things out before you even start incorporating it into a real world thing. Once you have all that figured out, then you can come back to the director and say, okay, here's what it's going to take to do this. Here's what we need. Here's the time it's going to take. And from that point on, sometimes there's other revisions that you have to go through, but some of these projects I work on are a year in advance. Now, with Looking Glass, sometimes it's those ideas come and you're problem solving within a matter of weeks instead, but usually you're working on some of these projects a year in advance sometimes.
Wow. So you co-designed the towel line apparatus with mathematician Henry Segerman?
Segerman, yes.
Segerman, okay. There was a wild collaboration between theater and math.
Yeah.
So how did that partnership begin, and what did you learn through all of that?
Oh, man. So that partnership was, first off, just strike up conversations with people. You never know where it's going to lead to. And that's kind of how this one came about. We were both fairly new professors here. We were at a new faculty workshop. And one of the things they asked us to do, everybody in the room, was sketch out their most recent research that they were doing. I was working on Little Prince. I was working on Little Prince at the time. And so I was creating all the, different planetary men apparatus and everything. And he just leans over to me and he was like, what is all that? I was like, oh, it's, I do a lot of rigging and stuff for theater. And he was like, I need to talk with you afterwards. Okay. And so after the meeting, he comes up and he's like, so, hey, just, I do some juggling and stuff. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. Awesome. And he was like, but, I also, when I do a juggling, I, travel across the country and, across the world. And I met, oh God, what's his name? There was a artist and they were talking about these apparatus and it got his brain thinking about them. And so being a mathematician that deals with spatial stuff, he had created all these just different ideas that he had and had them 3D printing. And at that time, no one had a 3D printer in their office. We had to send it off. And so he had all these little models that he showed me and he was like, oh, well, there's this and it kind of does this. I think there are like 4 or 5 different ones that he showed me. But the towel line to me really was like, oh no, that's something that I think people could use. That would be not only in the theater world, but more in the circus. People would love this. And he had designed it as a ground-based apparatus, based on these mathematical principles that it'd go in one direction. If you leaned one way, it would change direction. If you leaned a different way, it would go this different direction. But I saw it as multiple things. That's really cool. I can see a lot of great work with that, kind of based off of what's called a sire wheel or the German wheel. But I was like, that's also a really cool aerial. It could be a really cool aerial apparatus. And so I kind of took it and started playing around with it. I actually got some Marvel figures that fully articulate.
Sure.
Would put them inside of it and play around with the balance of it and how it moved, how it leaned, on the ground. And then I'd start playing around with aerial, different things. It's like, I think we can build this. I think this people would enjoy. And so I did some presentations. I wrote some grants, got some funding for it, and was able to secure funding to have it built in full scale. And so he was thrilled that this thing was going to get built. And so I was able to get it built. Chicago Fly House, I knew people up there, and we had them build it for us. And they actually had this special welder fabricate it for us because, it's not, there's not, of course, not a square edge, and it's like these very specific curves that have to be welded together. So we had it fabricated there. It came back here for a while. I did some workshops with it there while I was there. Brought it back here, and then this was in 2018. I got put in contact with the Muse in Brooklyn, New York, which was a huge circus training facility there. And we got to talking. And so we took it up to the Muse in Brooklyn and had it shipped there. And then I went up there with some students, and one of the world's top German wheel performers got in it and started really testing it out. And at first he was having a hard time because he just could, and then the next day he came in, and what he was able to do was pretty remarkable. All the stuff that he was putting around. I've got some great video of it. And so we did this whole weekend workshop on the ground, in the air, all these different artists on it. And we decided that we were going to put a show together with it. We were like, they took it around to a couple of other venues there, people at the Muse, and they had worked through some contacts and working with them. I went out there for another summer. We did a small workshop viewing of it with some people. People loved it. So we started really ramping that up. We had a show fully in place. We built a whole show. It was an hour-long show around this apparatus. We had people, touring managers there looking for it to go out. It was going to open up the 2020 German Wheel International Festival. All these things lined up. That show was on February 15th, 2020. I flew out, huge success. People loved it. We had some lines on some tours of it. We know what happened 2 weeks later. So unfortunately, it just sat in New York. They couldn't even go into their space for over a year or so, Yeah. Some of those people left. And of course, them not being able to produce, them not able to have classes, they end up having to close down.
Ooh.
So, it was up there, and it was in 2022. I went up there to get it, and there was one last show with it and some other things. And so we're hoping to get it, find another place where we can get that going again. And
Have you used it here?
we've used it for a couple of small things, but just because our students don't really have the training, it's hard. It's hard because, this is something that, people that are so aware of their bodies and how slight movements can change things, that if I can't really, from a liability standpoint, put somebody in it and them be injured. But, actually, I'm going to jump back a little ways, because one of the other things that I tell people all the time about me getting in the circus and understanding how circus apparatus work and how the actors interact with it is because I took a class in undergrad called Mime and Movement.
Mm.
Yeah, I'm a tech guy, but I took this Mime and Movement class little did I know, learning how a slight shift of the body or a slight movement can have a dramatic effect on something.
Very cool.
And, in the circus arts, when you're creating an apparatus, one slight move can have a huge dynamic effect on it.
Absolutely.
So, but unfortunately, 2020 changed a lot of things.
Sure did.
Changed a lot of things.
And then in some ways, I don't know if we'll ever get back there, but
Yeah.
maybe one of these days. So now you're here at Oklahoma State.
Yeah.
You joined as the technical director of production manager.
Mm-hmm.
What changes have you seen or been a part of since you came here?
I think there's been quite a bit has happened here at Oklahoma State University. When I got here in 2012, the Oklahoma State wasn't really known as a school for the arts, and it's still an ag school, engineering school, business school, but the arts have seen a huge growth here at OSU, which is very promising. Our department itself has seen significant growth. In 2017, we had 47 students total. Now we hover over 100. We had 110 this past year. We've incorporated a couple of new programs. We're not just a BA program. So we have our BA program, and this is the first time that I'm saying this publicly, is we have a new BFA in theatrical arts coming out that, takes a holistic approach to the BFA as well. So it's still some of that same training where you are ingrained in everything theater with emphasis in certain areas. So you get that more holistic approach to it. We have, expanded. We start to get, I think, a little bit more recognition. OU, OCU, and even UC are the big schools, but people are recognizing what we are doing. People are recognizing our students and their hard work and their value. And Stillwater itself has changed, even in the time that I've been here, has changed dramatically in terms of its support for the arts. We have the McKnight Center over there. We have world-class tours coming through. Downtown, we have Block 34, where there's concerts going on all the time. We have an art museum. So, Stillwater's kind of become this nice little arts hub, which has been really nice to see. And I feel like, my wife and I have been a big part of that.
Excellent. I like to hear that. So going from technical director and production manager to now head of the theater.
Yeah.
It's kind of a big jump there.
Yeah.
How did that come about, and what went through your head through all that?
For me, I'll admit it was never an aspiration for me. It goes back to what I said earlier, that, I wanted, to teach, and I wanted to give back to the Oklahoma community and let them know about the theater arts and what's out there. We had a department head who left in 2022. After only being here 3 years. And we were looking for somebody to lead the program. I was one of the few people that were a tenured professor. And so I took it on as interim at first. And then now I'm starting my third year. So as head, which will be 5 years, including the interim. But the reason I did it is, I want the department to succeed. I want to grow the arts. And, I want to nurture students and show them that there's more than, just what is here. Because a lot of our students, especially when I first got here, it's changed a little bit now, but most of them are just coming from rural Oklahoma. And they had not seen anything outside of those small, community theaters. And so I really want to show them the whole world of theater. And so that's why I took it on, because I felt that I could do a lot with the department and for the arts here in Stillwater. and Oklahoma.
Excellent. So you were named an Oklahoma Da Vinci Fellow.
Yeah.
And you hold the Mary Lou Lemon Endowed Professorship for Underrepresented Voices. So, number one, what's the Oklahoma Da Vinci Fellow?
So it's educators here in the state, and it's for creative and innovative professors in the state. And so when I was working on the TAL line back in 2017, that's what I used to propose to become a Da Vinci Fellow.
Well, there you go.
And for me, people that know me, Da Vinci is my favorite artist / designer / to me, he exemplifies like the theater artist, you know.
Yeah.
And because he's not only an artist, he's technical, brilliant mind. So for me to win that was, that holds a soft spot in my heart. I think always will.
And the Mary Lou Lemon Endowed Professorship for Underrepresented Voices. What does that mean?
So it was a endowment to, underrepresented voices in multiple contexts. So for me, I use it in a couple different ways. One is it allows us to do certain shows, of course, as a department head and, administrator, you're always wanting to do shows that bring in money, box office revenue, right? One of the things that allows me to do is do shows that maybe aren't going to be necessarily big box office hits, but tell a story of, how you interpret that underrepresented, where I have a little bit more leeway to do that. I'm able to help students that maybe aren't able to, whether it's through funding or produce of shows, or I bring in guest artists. That's one of my big things with it. I bring in guest artists from all over to work with our students, from different nationalities, from different viewpoints, so that they get that perspective. I, use it to help fund student projects when they want to do one of those crazy shows in the studio theater that, they want to do. It's like, okay, so it's just finding ways to bring in different viewpoints and cultures into the department and not have to worry about, I've got to make money on this.
Ooh.
We have brought in, I worked with the Center for Africana Studies to bring in a guest artist last year. I brought in different guest artists in terms of strictly directors. So it just really depends. I use it for a lot of different things to open up students' minds to the different worlds out there, viewpoints, cultures, all those things.
Very cool. So 2026, what do you think students need most from theater training?
What they think need most, I think for me, boy, there's a couple of different things. One is a traditional one, but that's work ethic. But I think even more now than ever, we saw where everybody was specialized training. For me, since the pandemic, I've seen students that are most successful are the ones that have built that work ethic and can say, I can do that. I can go and I'm a performer, but I'm not just a musical theater performer. I can also dance. I can also act. Oh, wait, you need me to help you with that podcast. I understand sound enough. Or I also think that we need to be training them to be self-motivators. So many of our students, don't necessarily make a living in theater arts. They find other ways. So from a business standpoint, how can you take these skills, still apply them to the theatrical setting and the entertainment arts? I like to use the word entertainment arts a lot. And how can you apply them to all those different things so that you can still stay within this realm and make a living at it, and giving them those foundational skills to do that. Right. Because, when, everybody wants to be in music theater, right? Everybody loves music theater. What's the job opportunities? Okay. So yes, we'll give you skills to become, be in music theater too. But what can you do with those skills outside of that? And like I said, not just in, the entertainment arts. And when we talk about design and production, there's a whole other realm that they can take these skills and apply them to. And I tell students all the time, is you don't know where this world's going to take you. And, just because it's not the biggest and brightest thing, it's not New York, still do it. Learn from that experience. You never know where it's going to take you. Did I think I would be doing circus and aerial arts? I didn't study that in undergrad. I didn't study it in grad school. I kept learning. And here I am, right? And I took that chance. I took the chance. And I think that's what's, important to say. Take the risk. The most successful students are the ones that are like, I'm going to do it. And they keep going. They keep trying. They keep working at it. And if we can just instill those skills along with all the others, I think we are successful.
Very cool. I like that. So Oklahoma State has produced everything from classics to new works and to some very tech-heavy productions. By the way, I loved Alice by Heart.
Oh, did you come see that?
Yes. And
right.
Quickly became one of my top 10 musicals of all time. But I loved the set and everything for that. It was just a great look for it. It just really kind of set for me. So what are some recent projects that best represent the department's identity right now?
Gosh. Well, first, from an identity standpoint, let me go back and talk about our process for season selection, because you hit it a little bit on the head. Is we do a lot of different things. And the reason we do that is we want our students not to be classical or not to be this or not to be that. We want them to get an experience from classical, new works, musicals, all those different things. I will say that in the past, 3 years, we really, I feel like we stepped up our game. Talk about Alice by Heart. That was a great show. One of our bigger selling shows in recent years, until of course we hit Cinderella, which is now our all-time. We had 2 sold out houses. Our smallest house was $350, which if we had $350 for a house 5-6 years ago, well, pre-pandemic even, that was a huge thing. So, but we're also, that studio space we have that seats 70 people. God, we do some great work in there too.
Mm.
We just got doing a show called Everybody that absolutely loved it. So I think for us, our identity is that it goes back to what I was saying, we're trying to create a well-rounded artist, theater maker.
Yeah.
That can go into a musical theater piece, can go into a dance show, can go into this. And I think that's a little bit about what our department is. We've got, OU, which has a music theater department, the music department, a theater department over here, school drama, well, we're trying to be all one, right? And create that consummate theater artist.
Very nice. So how does community engagement fit into your vision here at Oklahoma State?
I think community engagement is really important. I mean, without people in the theater, who you tell a story to.
As the old saying goes, butts in seats.
Butts in seats, right? And so, we have community engagement that we've been doing more to get people here, and we're starting to get more and more patrons in here. I think it's because we're telling different stories for different people. But, we have people that go down and do stuff at Town and Gown. Students will go down there and work with them. Me personally, my thing is, one of the ways I've been engaged with the community is I've been doing a lot of mural paintings here in town. So, I think it's getting people to understand what we do and create a great product, but, doing those little things, whether it's going out and doing a mural. I did, a couple people stopped by the other day from a church down the street, and they have no idea what to do about their lighting systems. Like, I'll come look at it. It's 2 blocks away. It'll take me, it'll take an hour maybe out of my day. And I was like, here's some people that in the, staging call. Those are the little things, right?
Absolutely.
But little by little becomes a lot.
Absolutely.
So those are the, just getting to know the people. And, Stillwater's not a big town, right? A little over 50,000 people. So, you start getting to know people and work with them. That spread.
Word of mouth spreads fast.
Yeah.
So what's on the horizon for Oklahoma State Theater? New initiatives, partnerships, dreams that you're excited about?
Well, I already let one out of the bag, because we have that, the new BFA program. Right now, one of the big things on my docket has been raising scholarship funds. We started a program called Theater Circle 3 years ago. We just had our third big fundraiser for that, and that's all money that goes to student scholarships. And the reason why that's been a big thing for me is it allows us to recruit better students. And the better students we have here, the better the productions will be, the more engaging, so it kind of all pays off. And we have seen a payoff for in that. We have students from Texas, of course, hotbed for students, North Texas. But we have a student coming in from California. We had a student from New Jersey. So, we're starting to bring students in and make a regional name for ourselves. And that's really what it's about for me, is I want to create a regional name for OSU. I don't want to be the little school on the prairie.
Yeah.
That's what we were referred to. People said it all the time when I got here.
Yeah.
And I want us to become recognized as a regional artistic hub. There's OU, there's OCU, but we're bringing in different students. We serve a different demographic and a different part of the state. So
excellent. Okay, as we come to the end of our time here together, I like to involve all of my guests in what we call our curtain call curveballs. And if you've listened to this, you know what this is all about.
Yeah.
We have a series of questions that are off the top of your head, just kind of off the wall. Some may be about theater, some may not. And so it's just really the first thing that pops into your head when we ask these questions. So, if you could design a rig or special effect for any mythical creature, which one would you pick and why?
Oh God, mythical creatures. Well, if you know me, I love mythology. Gosh, which mythical creature? Probably. Gosh, now you got me stumped. So many. Probably Minotaur, just because I love bulls. It's been one of those things. I'm a Taurus, so the mythical creature would be a Minotaur.
Okay. If you had to join the circus as a performer, not a designer, what act would you attempt?
What I would probably not at the age I am now, but at a younger age, it would probably been the teeter board. I love watching the teeter board and people just jump and fly in the air all over the place.
Okay. What's the most tech director thing you've ever done in everyday life?
The most tech director thing I have done in everyday life. It's probably just when it comes to anything in my house, they involve, I got to draft it out. I've got to,
You're an engineer by heart.
yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
where do you want that picture? Well, I would sometimes with pictures, I'll just, it needs to be here. I'll be the designer and be like, okay, take it here. So, a lot of times I'm drafting it out before I implement it.
Fair enough. What's a smell that instantly transports you back to your childhood?
Probably not a good one, but cigarette smoke.
Yeah.
I don't do it anymore, but yeah. I smoked when I was young. My dad did, and
Same. Yeah. If OSU gave you an unlimited budget for one production, what's the first effect or design element you'd splurge on?
I'd probably create a big gantry train like in I don't know if you've ever seen Caw, the Circus Soleil. It's a big automated deck that's, I think it's like 30 by 60 that comes out like this over a big pip, and then it goes up vertical and it rotates and spikes come out and there's projections on it. People hide inside of it. It's just mesmerizing to watch something like that. And I forget how many tons it had to hold.
Wow.
And it was a multi-million-dollar project.
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
What's a completely irrational fear that you have that would surprise people?
Irrational fear. Irrational fear. There's nothing that, believe it or not, there's nothing that really comes to mind. Okay, got me stumped. You got me stumped.
That's fine. That's fine. Which Shakespeare character would be the worst person to fly on a harness, and why?
Oh, the worst Shakespeare. Oh, McBee. Why? I don't. Boy, these questions. My irrational fears. I'm going to get asked questions like this and I can't answer.
Yeah,
I have nothing to come up with.
great. Actors love the spotlight until it's on them. Yeah. So, if you could live inside any movie for 1 week, which one would you choose, and what role would you play?
It'd probably be The Matrix. I just love that movie when I was a kid. And or are we living in the Matrix right now?
We'll wake up one of these days. Well, Lee, that brings us to the end of our time here together. Hey, I appreciate you giving me some of your time, telling your story.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
So if someone were trying to reach you, trying to get a hold of you, how can they do that?
Theatre.okstate.edu is our website. My email's on there. That's probably the easiest way, is just to send me an email. We can get on our social medias as well, OK State Theater. See everything that we're doing, and that's the best way to get a hold of me and see what we're doing up here on the little school on the prairie up here at Oklahoma State.
What if people want to get tickets?
Theatre.okstate.edu. That's takes you to our link for box office, and you can get tickets online. We still have the cheapest tickets in the state, or in not the state maybe, but in Stillwater. Same as Town and Gown down there. So we keep our tickets pretty low so that everybody can afford a ticket and come see a show.
Everybody deserves to see theater.
Yeah.
All right, Lee, we appreciate all those websites, and those connections will all be in the show notes for this episode, so you guys can check all that out. Again, Lee, thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Giving us just a little bit of inside look into the Oklahoma State Theater program. We really appreciate that. For everybody else listening at home, thank you for giving us a little piece of your time for your drive or your time at home or your work, whatever it is. We thank you for just letting us be there. Check us out on Facebook, Instagram. You can also find us on YouTube. Our website is oklahomaonstage.org. And if you have any comments or questions, you can email us at oklahomaonstage@gmail.com. We thank you for being supporters of Oklahoma On Stage, but more importantly, no matter what you do, continue to support the arts.